Welcome back, Honors! Man, I know it's been a long time since that last flip, but let's keep getting after it, shall we? Now, I have to go do like this, and then I gotta do like this, and then I gotta get back to where we were, and then we got those. So in the last flip, we talked about the location of the major three Italian states, right? And then we talked about the Papal States and their government effectiveness and like their location in Italy, right? But now we're getting into Renaissance culture. So as you can tell really, really quickly, before we go any further, what is the Renaissance, of course, in French means rebirth, right? That's what the word itself means in French. Specifically, though, what is being rebirthed? All right, so let's talk about that really quick, okay? What's actually being rebirthed in the Renaissance is economics and the intelligence of the Greeks and the Romans, right? That's what's truly being rebirthed, right? Because nowhere in history has anybody had a Renaissance or an intellectual growth period that wasn't backed by a massive flow of funds, all right? So, like, you're talking about a huge leap forward in economics and a growth in money-making systems, right? So then that's going to allow for the intelligent community to try and dig up into the old ways of thinking with the Greeks and the Romans, and they're going to start rebirthing these ideas. So instead of being all Middle Ages, two-dimensional, and gross-like, they're going to bring back things like sculpture, architecture, frescoes that have been going on since the Minoans that not a single person was making during the Middle Ages. I know that's an aggressive thing to say because there were people during the Middle Ages that were creating some fresco, especially in the late Middle Ages, people like Ghirlandaio and Pico and people like that. But we're not getting into that right now. All right, so the Renaissance ideas are going to see a massive amount of rebirth. And it's all going to start in Italy. Right now you can get all this stuff. It's going to start in Italy, and it's going to lead to a renewed interest in the development of art, literature, science, and learning, and economics. Money, 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 money. You have to understand that that's one of the biggest components of this whole thing, right? People are going to start thinking more like the ancient Greeks and Romans. Sorry, I forgot to put that in there. And Romans, and believe in their ability to create and achieve, right? Now, this is going to lead to a hugely important concept and an explosion of this idea known as humanism, right? So, thinkers are going to begin to re-examine old ideas and discover new ones, right? So, education and these new adventuring out there to discover these new things is going to lead to this concept known as humanism, right? Humanism, if you want to go ahead and jot down this phrase, humanism is the study of worldly subjects and things, or secular ideas, or secularism, right? Studying of worldly things, the things that exist around us, and an enhanced idea in a person's ability to create and achieve to their fullest potential, right? For example, humanism is best seen in people like Leonardo da Vinci. It's most visible in the explosion of art, right? So let's take a quick example to look at this. This right here, the Vitruvian Man, right? The Vitruvian Man, also meaning the virtue of man, right, is supposed to be a very, very famous piece of art. Ironically enough, if you look up here in the top area, this is actually an explosion of the mind, right? So some of you are thinking, well, what do you mean, Mr. Terry? I don't understand what you're saying. Leonardo da Vinci drew this originally, right? Funny enough about Leonardo da Vinci, though, he drew this in one of his journals. This is nothing but a sketch of Leonardo da Vinci's, so he can figure out the true proportionality of the human body so that he himself can better depict them in art, right? He used this image to show that a man's height is equal to that of his wingspan because he's sitting inside of a squared image, right? So he uses it to actually explain that the wingspan of a human being must be their height, right? He also uses it to break down the different sections of the human body. Also using this, you can see different proportionality parts about the human body. For example, your foot is the size of your forearm, right? See, I know I got gangly feet. Don't look at them. All right, so anyway, your foot is the size of your forearm from elbow to wrist, right? And he also theorized that you're about 10 heads tall. He used this intelligence not so he could draw something in a journal and make a better image of it. He used this intelligence so that he can actually create better imagery and expound his art, right? Like, let's look at another example real quick. Here's another great example of Leonardo's journals, and it's a good example of humanism, right? So, baby in womb, Da Vinci drawing. All right, so this is another one of his drawings from his journals, and he actually did studies of the fetus in the womb inside of like many sections of his journals as well. This is actually from a cadavered woman who actually died while she was pregnant. So her and the baby actually unfortunately perished, but he is going to dissect this body open so he can further study the image of a person in growth, right? Like, so like he's using this to try and create better images so he can even understand how the human body creates new life, right? Like, so this is just like phenomenally important because these drawings are wildly better than anything from the Middle Ages, and this is in a man's journal, right? So ironically enough, Da Vinci was also very scatterbrained, so he has like shopping lists like throughout, like grocery lists throughout all of his journals, like next to stuff like this. He also, though, is phenomenally intelligent because he wrote everything backwards and in a code. So you had to actually take a mirror and stick it in the binding to be able to read it in the reverse direction. And eventually we cracked the code and we can understand what he's trying to say in most of his journals. Some of the words that he used we're still kind of like trying to figure out. Hence why they called the book series the Da Vinci Code, right? So, but it's a phenomenal example of humanism because it's the rebirth of intelligence. It's the rebirth of concepts that are going to lead to people growing curiosity. How can we figure out how to draw a better person? Where does this life come from? How can I make everything better, right? And so, like I said a second ago, humanism is the study of worldly subjects, right? Usually focused on individual achievement and growth. And a Renaissance man is someone who can respond to all kinds of situations, right? So this is going to bring in the idea of that true human potential, right? So a truly good Renaissance man like Da Vinci, who I think is a little bit overrated, I'm much more of a Michelangelo fan personally, even though ironically enough our personalities cannot be any different. But a true Renaissance man was a writer, a musician, a linguist, an artist, a scientist, a creator of all things, right? So it's very important to understand these concepts, okay? So humanism, money word, put a star next to it. I'm going to be talking about it all the time, right? But in the long run, though, we also come back to one other area as well. Some of y'all are sitting there asking yourself, well, still, Mr. Terry, I don't understand. Why not France? Why not Germany? Why not all these other places? Why does it have to be created in Italy? Well, a lot of it has to do with things like Italy was the home of the former Roman Empire. You're going to end up with 4 reasons why Italy here in about 2 seconds, all right? Italy was the home of the former Roman Empire. Where the thing would collapse and die is going to be where the rebirth of intelligence grows out of, right? Many ruins, because of this, are going to be around in good condition for study and interpretation. Brunelleschi, when he designs his dome that goes on top of the building that I showed my wife and I in front of in the last flip, he used studying the Pantheon, which is the huge domed structure with the big hole in the top of it that I showed you that was built under the reign of Augustus by his buddy Marcus Agrippa. He used the study of that building to try and figure out how to create a dome of his own, right? So many ruins and artifacts are still around. Also, boom, the third one, you have the return of economics, right? So that's big, return of money. And then also the fourth one is due to the massive power, growth, and revenue of the Catholic Church in Italy, right? So that was bringing in so much money and so much power and growing exponentially that it was creating an area that was ripe for the Renaissance because they were going to start spending that money on beautifying churches, on creating new artworks that go inside of them, on redoing some of these old ones, which I'm about to show you one here in a second as your artwork example, right? By the way, your art assignments are posted on Google Classroom, and my next video, you don't have to necessarily write notes in. It's just supposed to be an example of what your artwork presentations are supposed to look like, all right? So those are the 4 big reasons why Italy, okay? So we already know this. Don't write this top one down. You don't need to know this one necessarily either. All right. So, but the biggest other reason why it's Italy as well, so 5 reasons actually really why it's Italy, is the growth of patrons as well and patronage and the idea of supporting artists and their artwork, right? So a patron, what they are, is they're financial supporters, right? They finance the Renaissance, they give it power, and the biggest thing is you got big examples of them. And this is where we're going to leave off on this flip. We're going to leave off right here at these patrons. And then I'm going to show you some stuff in the next flip. Well, actually, no, we have one more slide after this. All right, so the Medici family. Say it one time. Say Medici. Say Medici. Medici, all right? Don't say Medici. It's annoying, all right? So the Medici family of Florence is one of the best examples of patronage out there. Also, the Catholic Church is one of the best examples of patronage out there. But the Medici family were the informal and actually at one point formal rulers of Florence for over 300 years, right? They created the most powerful bank in Europe, the Medici Family Bank, right? And they were huge patrons of major artworks, right? You had a humongous growth out of Florence, and it was all due to this family, right? So these guys, okay? So, like, for example, Cosimo the Elder is right there. Lorenzo the Great is right, or Lorenzo the Magnificent is, like, right there, right? Is it Lorenzo the Magnificent? I think it's Il Magnifico. Lorenzo Medici. All right, so he has a cool nickname. But Lorenzo Medici was a statesman, diplomat. Lorenzo de' Medici. We're not going to say what he is. The Magnificent, yep. Lorenzo the Magnificent, this guy, is going to be the one that directly finances the High Renaissance, and he actually lets Michelangelo live in his house for a time period, right? So they grow so powerful that they even, have 2 popes out of their entire family. This is Leo X right here. He was a Medici pope. So just to show you, they're massively influential, right? And I've actually seen their house. It's the Palazzo del Vecchio. And then this is the big reason why, okay? Their artwork and the Medici along with the Sforzas, along with the Catholic Church, are going to create a hotbed of new artistic styles and concepts, right? So art is going to become much more stylized. It's going to represent humans and landscapes. It's going to represent perspective, real life art. It's going to have depth and proportion, and shading, and things like that, right? And then they're also going to make art look textured and real. And sculptors are going to actually study human anatomy to get bodily proportions right. So looking at these 6 artworks right here, these two are Middle Ages. This one's from the Roman period. These 3 are Renaissance. So as you can see, Roman, garbage, awesome, right? Like just the symbolism alone. This one's actually Botticelli's Lady with Pomegranate, right? And it's Mary, of course, with baby Jesus, right? And there's a depth to it, right? There's layers to it. As you can see, like, both of the figures have crowns on them that are very, very subtle. They're very, very real-life looking. And also the symbolism is wild because this baby actually has a pomegranate that's sitting directly over its heart. That's why it's called Lady with Pomegranate. It's because the pomegranate is meant to symbolize the drops of blood that baby is going to one day spill to save all of mankind. Because it's full of those little red capsulated seeds, right? So, but that's just an example, all right? Like, that's a quick example, too. I could talk about this painting for days, but I don't have enough time, and I don't want to, like, take up too much of your, like, break. So, we're going to stop right there, right? And we're going to move now into our Renaissance art example. In my next video, you don't have to take notes on. It's just a good example of what a Renaissance art presentation should look like, all right? So, go ahead and take a break, and I'll see you in a minute.